SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first purchase.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are live in the 702 on a spectacular Saturday and full of all-star festivities going on. This is the Snake Sports Talk Show, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Those are all the social medias you can like, follow, subscribe, and hit the bell button to keep you up to date on future and past shows. What a show that we've got going on today. Chris Micieli with Locked On Avalanche is going to be joining me here in a couple minutes. And, of course, Dane Lewis from the Dallas Stars is going to be joining me as well on the bottom half of the hour. So much to talk about, but all-star festivities. Isn't it always like the fun time around when, you know, the season's about to close up for the NFL, NHL season is going on strong, and of course, pushing towards the path to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And of course, the NBA, it's been getting spicy now in the last couple of days. So I'm really excited about what this next second half of the season is literally going to look like for every single one of us. But yeah, I can't wait for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. There's a lot of talks around the league on different trades, different predictions, and hopefully we'll see who gets into the playoffs. So I do want to touch on this subject, though, because with all-star festivities going on, we have the Pro Bowl here in Vegas. We've also got down in South Florida, the NHL All-Star Weekend as well. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is because this really sheds some light on the subject. And people are thinking there's not really going to be a market for him moving forward. So who are we talking about first of all? Well, quarterback Derek Carr. A lot of you I know can't stand or don't like Derek Carr. I say the opposite. I think Derek Carr is a real good quarterback. He may not be up to the elite statuses of Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, but good enough in the last few years where he stayed consistent. The touchdown to interception ratio has been at its best. But to say he doesn't have a market, you do know and you do realize he was selected for the Pro Bowl. And when he met up with Ryan Clark, former NFL player, and of course, a really good ESPN analyst, he ended up getting asked, you know, how hot it would be up in Vegas. And his response was, it's not that hot, you know, and I'm going to be leaving. Most people would think, oh, Derek Carr's got jokes. Was he really joking about that when he made a jab at the Raiders? My big point is, for most of you that don't see it, Derek Carr is capable of taking a team to the playoffs. The problem of it is he had not gotten a lot of the defensive support that he hoped he would have. Defense was 32nd in the league. And he had 6 different head coaches in 9 years. Was that Derek Carr's fault? Was it Derek Carr's fault that the fact that a former player literally was intoxicated, went way over the speed limit, and ended up killing somebody in a car crash? That's Derek Carr's fault for that? Was it Derek Carr's fault that one of the former players on his social media showing off all of his weapons and threatening somebody on social media, which I think is the most childish thing to do in these days, that's his fault for that? You don't realize a lot of the turmoils that Derek Carr had to literally go through. It was all the motions in this organization with the Raiders. I live here and I've been born and raised here in Las Vegas my entire life, just before everything started booming. It was getting to the point where we started getting the developments. Teams were starting to come out here. Sports betting was making an absolute explosion. And now we finally have the Raiders. We have the Golden Knights. We may potentially have the NBA here. And who knows what's happening with as far as Major League Baseball is concerned. Right now, the window for the Oakland A's is running out. But I can tell you this. It's a small town. It's a small town minded city. Most people don't know that. Lots of people on the outskirts of the strip and all the way around, because that's exactly where everybody believes everyone lives at. We have a living on the outside of the lights. We do. We have nice, beautiful homes here. I'm in myself in a beautiful home where I'm at, where I cast all of my shows. I usually never always plan being up on the strip all the time. That's just not my kind of living. But the thing about it is that the Raiders, they know from during those times in Oakland, they were so mediocre. They have not figured themselves out since their last Super Bowl championship. And here's the other part. Now what's the ripple effect? Tom Brady ain't going to Vegas. He's now officially retired. So that kind of spoils that deal. But if you're planning on getting somebody like an Aaron Rodgers, the only thing that this kind of details, you are going backwards and you're going back to the old Rich Gannon strategy. I mean, that was the only time that they could ever produce. After Rich Gannon, 20 quarterbacks later, Kerry Collins, Matt Toyasasopo, Andrew Walter, Jamarcus Russell, Dante Culpepper, Matt McGloin. Do I need to extend the list of every single quarterback before you could find a franchise quarterback again? Derek Carr absolutely has an open market. And just because he had a down year does not mean he's going to be all that terrible come next season. Because I guarantee you, he's going to have a lot of vengeance. He's also going to be really looking into this schedule. And there are several teams that may be interested. The Commanders, the Jets, possibly the Panthers. But I feel like the Panthers might go a different route. I explained it in my last episode. I feel like because with Frank Reich being there, I think the Panthers honestly should be smart enough to where they have their bridge quarterback in Sam Darnold. Maybe they should at the very least finagle to go and get Will Levis, because I do think the NFC needs more talent at quarterback. The only thing they find is hidden gems. I don't know if Derek Carr would honestly be a perfect fit in Carolina. They're in a rebuild and reshape mode, but we know the division is wide open with Tom Brady not there in Tampa Bay. And you've got New Orleans with Andy Dalton, and you've also got Desmond Ridder for Atlanta. So you can tell that division is not going to be as competitive as people think. It is way open for grabs. But to say there's not an open market for Derek Carr, I would completely and strongly disagree. I think wherever Derek Carr goes into, he's going to be happy. He's going to feel like he's respected. And at the same time, he's going to feel like he's loved. Because since moving from Oakland to Las Vegas, and honestly, this is my thing. His kids ended up going to the same church ministry and school that my sister and brother-in-law actually do ministries at. And they're great kids. It's a great family. They're very private. They're also somebody that are very uplifting. And it's one of the things we kind of get a little bit, we kind of get confused at times. But the fact of the matter is, he's a man of God. He's also somebody who's very uplifting and is somebody that wants to be loved and wants to be treated with respect. And I don't blame them. I feel like the entirety of it all, I mean, how do you think Devontae Adams even got here to Vegas? It's because of Derek Carr. With all these things and with all these movements, I don't know how the Raiders are going to end up being, but I can tell you this. Sean Payton's in town now in Denver. Justin Herbert just got himself a brand new offensive coordinator, and I think Kellen Moore will literally light up this division and taking advantage of Dallas's dysfunction and Kansas City's Kansas City with Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. You're going to see that in the Super Bowl next Sunday. So all I could say is good luck with the Raiders. Not sure exactly how that's going to pan out for him, but I think Derek Carr has an open market. I think he'll be doing just fine, and I think he will work with the best of weapons, plus a really good offensive line and a very supportive defense in the end. All right, so with All-Star festivities going on, of course, for yesterday and today and all throughout the rest of this weekend, and joining me live here via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, Chris Micieli from Locked On Avalanche. So, all right, All-Star festivities, there's nothing like it, right? We love this kind of stuff, and this year being in South Florida, I was there at the festivities last year when it was in Vegas, and I thought, this is absolutely fun. It's entertaining, and everybody gets a chance to really meet the stars, see what they showcase on a daily basis in the NHL. But here's one question, though, that I do want to ask before we dive deep into the Avalanche. So I came across a post about the views right now in the NHL. It's not looking great. It dropped down 22%. I know with the change from the NBC to Turner Sports now on a 7-year deal, you got ESPN Plus, you got all the scoops, every single one of like legends like Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier and so many others showcasing it. How do you kind of like seen this whole thing when the deal went down? I mean, is this going to be something at some point that's going to benefit the NHL, or do you kind of see this taking a different route?
So I think you have to take that number kind of with a grain of salt, actually. And I'm not going to like use this as an excuse, but it's an excuse, and it's kind of a legitimate one. So everybody's kind of focusing on that, you know, it's gone down in year 2. Well, one major thing that's happening that didn't happen in year 1 of this deal with ESPN and TNT is ESPN didn't put a hockey game on the same time as Sunday Night Football. And they did for the duration of this football season. So last year, in the first year, they were putting on, and this just goes to show you how that time frame is literally a black hole for television, because it's Sunday Night Football or nothing. You don't put your like kind of primetime stuff on other networks. ESPN was putting on I can never remember because I don't really follow basketball that much. Like, is it the G League or the D League or something like that?
Yeah, the G League and a bunch of other. Yeah,
they were putting that. Like, I was joking on our show with my co-host Kyle. Like, it was basically like they were putting stuff that's on the Ocho from ESPN on regular ESPN because nobody tunes in. They were putting hockey games on during that time. So I know The Athletic, they ran the numbers. If you remove those games, the numbers are kind of where they were last year. So, I mean, that's a big hit that they take. Now, that's not to like excuse it away and say like there's not, you know, some things that they have to address. They definitely do. It's not easy to find a hockey game, right? Like, if you're a fan, you can go find, you know, ESPN Plus is a little bit like difficult to use just for your average everyday person. And you can't just tune into ESPN Plus and just, you know, and there's a hockey game just glaring you in the face. Yeah. They bury it a little bit. So you kind of have to know what you're doing and where to look. You can't just turn on, you know, like college basketball. There's a college basketball game on 20 different channels. You don't get that with hockey. So you do have to go find it. They have to correct that stuff. They have to make it more accessible to just the average kind of like channel surfer. And they really have to address this blackout situation, because it's just, and when you're sitting fourth, like comfortably fourth in you know, behind all the other major sports, you need to do things a little bit differently and maybe take some chances. And they're just going about the old, you know, same old NHL. And I guess we're just happy being there, but they shouldn't be. And there's things that they can do. It's just very slow to do that.
Yeah, it just seems like they got to have, you know, new people in the building, obviously, with as far as the marketing purposes and, of course, you know, spreading out, you know, promos and so much more. But I mean, hey, I'd be sticking to the old school to where I live here in Vegas. I've got my promo code for tickets. So I just go right down to the Fortress at any time that I would want to and just, you know, catch the atmosphere and the action from there. Because honestly, being in a hockey setting versus when you're watching it on television, it's completely different. You feel so energized being there. I'm sure you'd feel the same way when you see Ball Arena and you see the Avalanche and just how energetic the fans can be. I mean, hockey fans, I will say, at times, depending on their opponents, they can get a little ruthless. But I like it because it's like, hey, this is entertainment stuff. I'm like, why are we not showcasing this? Yeah. Like, then at that point, it would make so much of a difference. But I agree with you. I mean, the market itself, first of all, they're not going to overlap the NFL in views. The NFL is just absolutely king. I mean, their promos, everybody's buying literally everything of what the NFL can make. Talking about, the Colorado Avalanche, I know, coming off last year, which was an amazing season, and it was one that, Colorado, they needed to do. I mean, Joe Sakic, he really put together this roster and made a ton of moves, but it was well worth it in the end. They got a Stanley Cup 20 years later after the last one they won. But this year kind of seemed pretty rocky. Injuries were happening. There was a bit of inconsistencies. How have you seen this team perform versus what we saw from last year? Are there some adjustments that needed to be made? I know it's kind of tough with injuries, but what have you seen that has kind of been the biggest, that's kind of been the big eye opener that you're hoping the Avalanche could really fix all the way to the second half of this season?
So, yeah, I mean, injuries have not helped. And you're waiting for all these guys to come back one at a time. Like with Gabe Landeskog, he hasn't played a second this year. And in the beginning, he had some surgery, and they said he should be back they said 12 weeks, which 12 weeks was middle of January. And then we got right around the new year, and they were like, he's nowhere near it. They're thinking middle of March now. So it could be 8 weeks beyond when they initially thought he was going to come back. So, yeah, that hurts. That's your captain. But all along the way, all these guys were just dropping like flies. And you've gotten most of your team back now. You're still missing some key roster players, but they're losing to teams they shouldn't be losing to. And I know that's tough to say in hockey because, parity in hockey is real, but there's still those really like bottom dwelling teams that someone like the Avalanche should be beating. And they had enough guys back where you should be beating teams like Chicago and Arizona and Vancouver, who they lost to twice. Yeah. So they've left a lot of points on the board losing to teams like that. And then they turn around and beat a surprising but good team this year in Seattle. I mean, they go into Calgary and beat Calgary. So it's just like, are they playing to the level of their opponent? Maybe, which is a little bit shocking for a team that, like you said, had a fantastic one of the best seasons in the last 20 years for any team. But I think they needed this break for the All-Star break to come back. They should be getting Bo Byram back after the break, Val Nichushkin after the break, Josh Manson after the break. So big components to what they do as a team should all be coming back. If not game one against Pittsburgh next week, maybe within like the first week, hopefully. And then I think they just needed a little bit of a breather to just sit back and say, like, oh yeah, let's kind of just take a break. They were playing well, but I mean, right around the new year, they were in a rut. I mean, they were playing horrible hockey, lost like 7 of 8, and then they turned it around by winning 6 in a row. So it's like, man, I think it's just going to be one of those seasons where it's an up and down year, but they have the mindset because they've done it all. They've won the cup. They've won the President's Trophy. They've done everything that a team can do. I think they have the mentality that Tampa Bay has of, we don't care where we finish in the regular season, get us to the postseason, and then that's when we can do our damage. I think they kind of have that mindset right now.
Yeah, and it's a real good mindset because obviously you want to punch your ticket into the playoffs, which is the first step. And then the next of it is obviously the availability of all the key and star players as well, because you want to have your best frontline guys there, attacking the net and putting a lot of pressure on opposing goaltenders. But at the same time, you got to have the right defenders to defend your goaltender and give them a lot of supports to, at the very least, start back up the offense and really spread around the ice. So it was interesting this year because you transitioned from, having Darcy Kemper as your netminder last year, winning it all. And then this year transitioning to going to Alexander Georgiev. Have you seen a bit of a change in the goaltending position since that transition? Like, what have you seen out of Georgiev this year that you kind of see some real good positives with this team?
He's been good, and he's been surprisingly good for me. I was very skeptical of that trade. Did I want Darcy Kemper back? I did, mainly because I didn't really think the market was that good of bringing in a free agent. I thought they were going to have to make some sort of deal if Kemper was going to walk, which obviously he did to the Washington Capitals, and he's having a very good year with them. I wasn't a big supporter of the deal for Georgiev because I didn't really think that he looked all that great in New York, and everything you heard about him was he was good when he was given, multiple games in a row and kind of got into a flow of a starting goalie, which he was never going to be in New York with Igor Shesterkin there. So I love, I stand corrected, and he has been great for the Avalanche, and I think he's been, as well as Kemper is doing in Washington. He kind of had a struggle in Colorado, and I just like Georgiev's quickness. The big thing with Kemper is he gives up kind of big rebounds. You don't really see that with Georgiev. He does the butterfly, then he bounces right back up. He's good positionally. He just anticipates where passes are going to go, where shooting lanes are going to be. I'm no expert in the goalie position because I never played it, but it's really, you can see how he plays the goalie position a lot differently than Darcy Kemper, because Kemper's a big guy.
Right.
Kemper's like 6'3" or something like that. Like he's a tall dude. Georgiev's a little bit on the smaller side. And I think this just goes to show you what Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic, they do their due diligence on guys, and they're willing to give someone like him the keys to a championship team, a guy that's unproven, and say, like, we have faith in you. And everybody's gotten behind him. He's been a pleasant surprise so far this season. Definitely.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I almost want to revert back to when Philip Grubauer came into Colorado out of Washington, because of course Braden Holtby was catching fire. Washington was kind of, rolling on this train, and then in comes Grubauer, and next thing you know, he's playing, to close to the elite level and, really getting comfortable in it. So I feel like, Georgiev, really a big surprise, but, it honestly doesn't feel like a surprise to me because of just the mentality Colorado has. So anybody that's coming into it, there's an agenda, there's an assignment, and that's where you're going with the flow of how this chemistry is working with this team. So all of these guys like Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan McKinnon, and Cale Makar, and a lot of these guys. I mean, this just proves this young core has just looking like its absolute dominant selves. I mean, we watched Tampa with Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov, and Braden Point, and several others. This young core, I mean, it's really just taken the NHL by storm. And, looking at Joe Sakic and a lot of the guys in the front office, I mean, seeing their talents and seeing a lot of these youngsters, I mean, this is proven to be, this is going to be the young core that's just going to be riding through this ship, maybe 5+ years, right?
Yeah. Mikko Rantanen, after this year, I think only has 1 or 2 years left on his current deal. So his is, I mean, it's not, tomorrow that they have to address this, but he's the first one of their big core that they're going to have to address. But they've locked up Nathan McKinnon. Obviously, his big contract goes into effect next year. They've locked up Cale Makar. Yeah, Mikko Rantanen. The juice of their team is under contract. Yeah. And, if you go to their cap friendly page, there's a lot of guys that are signed for next year. And I feel like that's fine for them. They feel like, okay, we'll mix and match kind of like the depth pieces when we need to. But as long as we got Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, Gabe Landeskog, who he signed a deal a couple years ago too. He's under contract. As long as we have those guys, we're in it. And we can piece things here and there for our bottom six guys, and we'll be fine. I think it's a little bit of a risk, but I mean, they kind of look at this like, okay, look at what Pittsburgh's done. As long as you have Sidney Crosby, Malgin there, like you're okay. And guys will want to come to you. Free agents will want to come to you and sign to play with those guys. And now that you have that Stanley Cup in your back pocket, you can market that to free agents. So I'm not saying it's like a destination Colorado for a lot of free agents, but it's more appealing than it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago when they had that dumpster fire of a season and nobody wanted to go there. But they kept guys intact. Matt Duchene's the only one who wanted to walk. I think he's regretting that now. And the future for this team looks bright. They might not be the best team year in and year out because of maybe, injuries like this year and some depth pieces made that you never know if those are going to pan out. Right. So sometimes they will, sometimes they won't, but they will always be in the hunt. And I think as a fan base, you're feeling pretty good about the next 7 years plus. It's a good feeling just knowing that you are going to be in it year in and year out.
Yeah. And I mean, it does bring me to my next question too, because it is interesting because seeing this team, I mean, it's a young core. It's a team that's really has developed and shaped into its own, into its own strengths. And not to mention too, I mean, like we said, the transitioning from Darcy Kemper to Alexander Georgiev. And now, seeing that, it's like you bring these players in, they look completely different than what they were when we previously saw them in their different teams. And then it's like they really do mesh into it. So I think that's a good selling pitch as well to a lot of these free agents coming into Colorado. So now we know the trade deadline is coming in close. And we know there's going to be some active movements. We just saw one not too long ago. Bo Horvat is now with the Islanders out of Vancouver. I feel like this is a real good fresh start for him because, New York, they needed something after they lost Jordan Eberle to the expansion draft, and we knew they lost their big-time elite scorer. So what are you hearing out of Colorado media right now? That is there a potential possibility where they may make a move, or do they kind of sit tight knowing that Nichushkin, Manson, and a couple of these guys, they're going to be coming back from injury? Because I know, from the change of the lineup, no more Nazem Kadri and no Andre Burakovsky, and that's going to be a little different. So could there maybe something in the works?
So it's funny with the Avalanche, like every trade season, their name is attached to always like the biggest fish in the market, and they never land them. And I think it's partly because they're not really going after those guys. Right. And maybe every once in a while they are. Like last year with Claude Giroux, they were in. They wanted him. And it came down to Giroux. It was his decision. Do you want to go to Colorado? You want to go to Florida? Obviously, he picked Florida. So every once in a while they are in on those guys, but it just seems like for whatever reason, like they don't bring them in. And I think it's because you don't really need to if you have all those guys that we were just talking about. And it's just kind of maybe like just the rich getting richer if they do bring someone like that in. This year, are they going to make trades? Yes. Like they are always active during the trade season. They've already made a deal to bring Matt Nieto back from the San Jose Sharks. Yep. That's what you're going to see. Those kind of depth pieces, those trades are likely what the Avalanche are going to do. They're attached to, like Patrick Kane and Taves from Chicago. You're hearing like maybe they do another deal for Timo Meier in San Jose. Like, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think it's going to be a big trade. You're going to get trades. I mean, that's just going to happen. But because so many teams are right up against the cap and there's no cap relief coming, likely next year, it might be like there's going to be a lot of rentals that guys don't re-sign. That because they just don't have the space. And with the cap going up maybe $1 million next year, you can't fit this $7-8+ million guy to re-sign him long term. I don't know. Like I do think the Avs will make some deals, but it's not going to be maybe the biggest name that they can bring in that they're attached to is like Sean Monahan from Montreal. Me personally, on a selfish level, and they have no need for him. I just love Shane Gostisbehere on Arizona, but they don't really need another defender right now. If like Josh Manson was going to be out for the duration of the season, maybe they do that deal. But I think for the Avalanche, fans are going to be a little bit disappointed because I don't feel like the big name that you're seeing on the marquees and stuff like that, I don't feel are coming to Colorado right now.
Yeah, and you kind of have a feeling. I mean, and I know fans, they're going to feel how they're going to feel, but at the same time, they're not the ones that are in, the front office behind closed doors, because I'm sure there's always frustration, no matter what the team. There's frustration because of the fact of just the cap flexibility and the fact that they can't bring in a lot of the guys. And it's funny you mentioned that because, of course, the first name thought that I would have thought of for a rental player, Brock Besser. He's going to be rental before he even goes and gets a contract, because he's been fighting this with Vancouver now for the last couple of years. And then Bo Horvat's gone. So it's like, do they really now invest in it, or is he going to get shipped off and then he's going to go and sign a contract elsewhere for long term? I mean, that's usually how it would be for rental players. But yeah, it's going to be really, really strange yet really interesting. But quick thing before we let you go. So we know, I always love this every year, and I've voiced out in this the last couple of years. And for me, I'm a diehard Golden Knights fan. I've seen this for any other team. January, February, and March are always the hardest months, because going into April, May, that is where you really got to prove yourself in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So have there been any teams you kept a close eye on that if the Avalanche do square off against in the Western Conference? Now, we know the Central has been getting really competitive with the last couple of teams now, but is there some teams right now that you're kind of feeling this might be our tough competition?
Well, yeah, I mean, Vegas, definitely. I don't know where they stand. I mean, I think that's a big hit from them with Stone. I mean, are they saying he is definitely out for the year? They haven't said that,
they
right?
said he's out indefinitely after that back surgery. But right now, the only reason of that is it's lighting the chair on fire for Kelly McCrimmon. Like he's kind of on thin ice at this point, because right now the offense is inconsistent, and it has been inconsistent in the last 5 seasons, and it's drove me nuts. But it's like, I just, you either got to figure this out, because I said this before. I was like, look, Matt Hoffman took a 1-year deal and it was cheap. Like, you can't bring somebody that's an elite scorer that can light this team up so they can be aggressive on offense. Like, I don't get it.
But they're if they're there, which you expect them to be, I think they obviously they're a difficult out, right? So I'll give you like 2 other teams, one from the Pacific, one from the Central. And it's odd saying this in year 2 for Seattle, but when you have those upstart teams that maybe weren't expected to be in the position that they are and have nothing to play. I don't want to say nothing to play for. They just don't have the monkey on their back. They can go into the playoffs and we're just playing with house money, right? And nobody's expecting, even though if we do finish number 1 in the division, or even if we just make it by a wild card, nobody's expecting much from them. I think their goaltending is going to hurt them. They can score with anybody, but if their goaltending can hang up and hold up, you might have a little bit of a problem getting them out. And the other one in the Central is Winnipeg. They are a complete team, and they have scorers. They have obviously one of the best goaltenders in the league with Connor Hellebuck, and their defense is great and solid. Winnipeg is going to be a very, very difficult team to eliminate from the playoffs. So I think if the Avalanche go up, let's say they go up against those 2 teams, like they're going up against the Kraken, I feel like they can handle the Kraken. I feel like they have the goaltending to do it. They have the defense to do that. They can kind of tamper that offensive ability that they have. Winnipeg is a complete team from top to bottom. Watch out for them. They're tough.
Yeah, I've watched Connor Hellebuck up front and in person, and that kid is a stud. And and Winnipeg plays hard. Like when I seen them against the Knights, when the Knights won in overtime, that was a hard game, but it was so much entertainment because I'm getting clashes on both sides, but I'm watching Hellebuck just make ridiculous stops that no other goaltender in this league could literally do. But it's why he's the best for a reason. And I've said it, like Winnipeg, that is their heartbeat is Connor Hellebuck, because without him, then they become completely irrelevant. You're hoping Mark Scheifele becomes red hot and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think those would definitely be tough teams. And it's really interesting, though, with Seattle. But I did say during the expansion, their focus was defense. Knowing a lot of the people they drafted, and then they get Jordan Eberle and a couple offensive guys. I mean, Matt Beniers, he's looking like a complete stud out of Michigan. And then you watch Jared McCann. So they're building that core. It's not quite solid yet, but it is to a point where they are going to get competitive. So, yeah, I think those are some pretty aggressive and pretty interesting teams for sure.
Yep.
Well, Chris, I appreciate you jumping on by. Where can people find you for everything Colorado Avalanche?
We're all over social media on Twitter, LOPN_Avalanche. Locked on Avalanche. On Instagram, what Twitter is LOPN. I don't know if I messed that up. Twitter is LOPN_Avalanche. Instagram, just Locked on Avalanche, and our YouTube channel as well. Just search Locked on Avalanche and subscribe to that.
Well, there you go, folks. And of course, too, a diehard Colorado Avalanche fan, because listen, I heard it from my fiance last year when the Avalanche won it all, and they're like, where have all these people come from? Because she is originally from Colorado, and it's like, you guys sprung 20 years out of the ground now to like celebrate it. And so, but you know, like I said, I mean, but those who have spent the long years watching Sakic and Peter Forsberg, I mean, hey, those were the fun years. And even with Patrick Waugh, you know, they were great. But it's good to see, you know, especially with a franchise building the core, staying, because they're so hyper aggressive. They're much like Tampa. And when they can use their speed and they're very aggressive, like watching McKinnon, it's like, oh, God, who's defending him? Because it's not going to be a fun show from here on out. But I appreciate you jumping on, Chris. Thank you so much for taking your time with us today. Have a great weekend. We know it's All-Star Weekend, so we're having all the fun here until Super Bowl Sunday comes around the corner. So take care of yourself, my friend.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep, there you go. Chris Micieli there with us here from Locked On Avalanche. And, of course, we're staying within the Central, and joining us here live via the Global Satellite Network presented by StreamYard, Dane Lewis, locked on those Dallas Stars. Man, they are feeling the stars shining this year with them leading up into the Central. So this has been really interesting about the Dallas Stars this year because of the fact of it's a new head coaching regime. I've always said this, Dallas has had a pedigree where they're a really good defensive team, from goaltending to, you know, Miro Heiskanen and a couple others. Now, we know losing John Klingberg, it's a bit of a hit, but at the same time, they're working with a lot of this defensive mentality. What have you been surprised to seeing with the Dallas Stars this season?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here and glad to be talking some Stars hockey. And yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head. This team, the identity over the past few years has been goaltending. It's been good defensemen, good defense in general, not allowing a ton of goals. But the surprise this year has been on the other end of the ice. It's the offense. The team has I believe, a plus 40 goal differential, which is in the top 5 in the league. I know it's way behind Boston, but everyone is seemingly behind Boston so far this season in just about every category. But that's really where the big surprises come this season, is how efficient the Stars have been on offense. And a lot of it starts with that solid defense. It's getting those stops, getting those clean zone exits, navigating the neutral zone, and then generating either, you know, odd man rush opportunities or, you know, just having numbers on the rush and getting a good shot on goal with, you know, some of these forwards that the Stars have that are having some pretty incredible seasons.
Yeah, and, you know, it is interesting, too. And talk to me about, you know, Pete DeBoer, because here's what I've said. And now I live in Vegas, and I hear a lot of Vegas media. I hear a lot of the Vegas fans. People were not fond of Pete DeBoer. I was the opposite. I said, listen, it's not like the Golden Knights have not had a pedigree of great coaches. I mean, they had the first year where they had Gerard Gallant, and they got him to the playoffs all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Pete DeBoer, twice getting into the conference final. Now, we know they fell short. I don't know why they fell short against Montreal. I thought that was just inexcusable, but still, he's a very solid coach. And I felt like last year missing the playoffs, it was on his way out. And I said, they've got to find the right head coach at this point, because losing Pete DeBoer, you're losing that defense. You're losing a lot of, like, not conservative offense, but the offense just has to be hyper aggressive. I've been preaching that for the last few years. So watching him now in Dallas and with him really working the pieces, I said, oh, Dallas is going to be a playoff team, because knowing his defensive mentality, and now he's working to the point where the offense is really good, and starting there with Jason Robertson. Like, how impressed have you been with Pete DeBoer this year?
Well, I've been very impressed, and it's been a pleasant surprise because I am on record saying whenever the Stars, signed him this summer, I wasn't too thrilled about it because I'd talked with some people that cover the Golden Knights to the same level that I cover the Stars, and they mentioned all of the, I guess controversy, for lack of a better word, around Pete DeBoer. There was seemingly maybe some bad relationships with his goaltenders, and just the organization in general seemed to not be in the best place. And so I was a little bit skeptical, but he's come in and I think put any concerns and doubts to rest, which is good. But also, if you look at, his track record, he has a history of doing very well in his first season in a new city. His first seasons with New Jersey and the San Jose Sharks, those teams went to the Stanley Cup Finals. They didn't win, but they made it, and they won a few games in that series. And so it's not a huge surprise if you've been following Pete DeBoer's story that he's doing what he's doing. But I mean, I haven't done massive deep dives on those other teams in Jersey or San Jose, but I feel like this team is a little bit different in that it has a few small holes here and there, but there's not really one part of this roster that you look at and say, man, this is a massive liability that keeps you from thinking that this team legitimately could come out of the Western Conference and be competing in the Stanley Cup Finals here in a few months.
Yeah, and and this is what I've pointed out, evaluating Pete DeBoer, and I actually did go on radio about this because I said this was not a bad hire, which is why, and listen, I live in Vegas and I've been around this, and the problem of it is because we're now making our mark in the sports market, and so it's so relatively brand new to us. We're not even 10 years into this puppy. And so when I made the point that Pete DeBoer, he's got playoff experience. He has a track record to where he's really good in the first years when he's with the team. But if you notice, look at the defensive lineups that he has had in the last few years. I mean, he brought in Erik Karlsson. He brought in, he had Marc-Edouard Vlasic. He had several of these defensive guys. Now, I know Martin Jones was kind of hit or miss from some areas, but he still worked it to his own to where he was a good goaltender. And then you look at the Golden Knights, Alex Pietrangelo, Brady McNabb, and then you had Marc-Andre Fleury before they had Robin Leonard. But the problem of it is that Vegas, they never gave a lot of guys chances. That's why I said, I'm like, if you watch him leave, this will be a little of a ripple effect, but you got to fill in the right person. And that's where they ended up getting Bruce Cassidy. So, which I thought was an interesting hire. I was really surprised at that from Boston, even though going to the final, they played real aggressive, and now they're different with Coach Montgomery there. But, Dallas, in my evaluation is they're going to be great defensive. You got to look at it from Miro Heiskanen. Now, they do lose John Klingberg, might be a hit, but the defense mentality has not lost itself. Then you got to spark up the offense. And I think, Tyler Seguin, I was like, he's got to get into that next level. Jamie Benn still has to stay consistent. And then Jason Robertson, man, the kid is just emerging. He's finally here in the NHL now to where he's established. The offense looks good. Now they're making a lot of opportunities to score on goals. So the emergence of Jason Robertson, I mean, you've been following him, you've been covering him. What have you been impressed about the most with Jason Robertson this year? I feel like he's really now set into his prime. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been the kind of the theme of this NHL season is all of these young stars that have been well known amongst their fan bases, kind of finally getting that national recognition, whether it's Robertson or Jack Hughes, Tage Thompson, and Robertson is right up there with those guys. And he's been, in conversations for, the Hart Trophy or being top 10 in points, top 10 in goals. And the thing that impresses me most is just his work ethic. Cause he's still in his early 20s. This is only his third season in the league, and he's progressively getting better. He's on pace to, absolutely shatter his numbers from last year, and also has a chance to, set a new Stars franchise record. I'm forgetting the exact number now, but Mike Modano, who's, the greatest Dallas Star of all time, holds just about every offensive statistical record on this team. And I think it's 93. Stars fans out there listening, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the record for most points in a season for a Dallas Star. And Jason Robertson's at 66 in 51 games. And so he's very much on pace to
Wow.
shatter that and kind of emerge as this next great Stars player in franchise history. And again, he's only in his third season, and he just works incredibly hard to get better at his game. And I think he's just becoming a more dimensional scorer that he can, score from just about anywhere on the ice. He's a weapon on the power play with seven power play goals and 24 power play points in total, which is the most on the team. And so there's not really a ton he can't do offensively, but even on the defensive side, I think he's showing some improvement season after season. And as years go on, I think he's going to, become a little bit better of a full 200-foot player. He might not reach the levels of a guy like Rope Hintz, but I think he's going to be pretty good for, the next 10, 15 years. And hopefully all of that's here in Dallas. I know there was a whole situation this summer with, his contract and getting an extension. And that's what makes it even more impressive is that he didn't get that deal until about a week before the season. So he missed training camp. He missed all the preseason games. And then he comes in and, just does not miss a beat. And he's doing what he's doing without the rest of the prep and the practice and whatnot that the rest of the team was doing throughout the late stages of the summer.
Yeah, that's insane. And that is a bright future talent for sure. And, I've seen this with, with Dallas over the years. We felt the way when Tyler Seguin, he moved from Boston to coming into Dallas, and then Jamie Benn, and then also adding in Jason Spezza. They wanted to make it where it was an elite offense. And so now, you add in Jason Robertson and he comes and puts in the work. The kid's phenomenal. And to be in, All-Star Weekend, you got him, and then also Coach Pete DeBoer for the Central. It really is a real high recognition as well, and something that Stars fans, you got to be excited about. So Jake Oettinger, the kid's looking real phenomenal behind net. And the fact of you're coming off of a timeline where Dallas had relied on Ben Bishop for a long time, and I always loved watching him play because I thought he was a very solid and defending goaltender. And then we go into the Stanley Cup final to where they had Anton Khudobin, where he caught fire. So watching Jake Oettinger and his play style at goaltender, what have you seen that you've been impressed by? And what are maybe some things he could adjust to as well on the long stretch going into the second half of the season?
Yeah, Jake Ottinger's been nothing short of spectacular this season. And if people have been watching him at all throughout his career, which is relatively young, he's been playing around the same time as Jason Robertson. A lot of it started last season at the end of the year with that, first round series against the Calgary Flames. The Stars, of course, lose that series in 7, but in no part to Jake Ottinger. He was phenomenal in that series, and it was the reason I think that series even went to 7 games and the Stars had a chance to advance. But there were big questions coming in of, well, can he maintain that? Was that just a flash in the pan performance? But I think he's put a lot of speculation to bed across the league. And I think even across the fan base, there was a little bit of those questions of, we know he's good, but can he play at that level consistently? And I think he's answered the call and been, maybe one of, if not the best goaltender in the league, dealing with some injuries here and there. He missed a little bit of, the season back in late October, early November. But after coming back from that injury, he has been a rock for this team in net. And it's hard to pinpoint something that he really needs to get better at. I think every goalie could, afford to handle the puck a little bit better, or, if they get those deflections, to either, be better at catching the puck and stopping it, or falling on it and stopping it. He really doesn't do a ton of things wrong or poorly. I think he's similar to Jason Robertson in a lot of ways of, he's a hard worker. So if he has a bad night or has a bad game, he's quick to point that out. There's a little bit of humility to him, and also willingness to work on what he did wrong and get better, get back on the ice the next day at practice, and work with the Stars coaching staff. And really the only concern I have for him is just the longevity of this season. He's played 38 games for this team as opposed to 16 for the Stars backup Scott Wedgwood, and it's not really something he can control. But you just want Jake Ottinger to play a lot and win some games for this team, but also get an adequate amount of rest, because once the playoffs come around, I think the Stars are very much going to be relying on him again in order to not just win games, but hopefully win a few series.
Yeah, Jake Ottinger, he has an absolute, he has a big task. And especially when you go into the playoffs, it's all or nothing at that point. And Watching a lot of goaltenders, yeah, they got to spend in all the time. They got to they got to basically stay solid. I mean, I watch a couple of goaltenders, even like Jacob Markstrom at the time with Vancouver, and it was just stressful because that much time. I give credit to a lot of those goaltenders during playoffs because it ain't easy, going in, playing competitively, and then you're spending so much of that time. You got to feel tired and sore after all those matchups. But so we know Dallas sitting comfortably up in first place in the Central. And we know that behind them we have Winnipeg, Minnesota, and then there's Edmonton and Colorado in that wild card spot so far. Has there been any teams that have caught your attention that could be tough competition moving into the Stanley Cup playoffs that Dallas really should prepare more for?
I think the easy answer is Colorado, and I know you just had Chris on a second ago, Locked On Avalanche. That's my guy. He's great, and I know we've had some back and forth, friendly back and forth about our teams, and I know he mentioned Winnipeg, and I think there should be a healthy fear of them, but I also think that team, has some holes as well that I won't get into because I think former Stars coach Rick Bowness has done a good job with that team, and while I think they could cause problems potentially with Connor Hellebuck in the playoffs, and guys like Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor. I think the Avalanche are the team to be concerned about because I think they're not at their best at the moment, both, in terms of their on the ice performance, but also health on the roster. I think once that team gets healthy and once they get back into the postseason, they're going to be, every year in the playoffs, there's that team that you just don't want to get matched up against. And I think that's going to be the Colorado Avalanche, at least on the Western Conference side of things, because they might not be the highest seeded team. They might get a wild card spot or they might get, the third or second seed in the Central Division. But even if Dallas holds on to the first seed, that's not a team that I want to match up with because I just don't know if Dallas has the the expertise on the roster and the experience on the roster to win that series, because a lot of those Colorado guys were on the team last year, and I imagine they're going to make some moves at the deadline. But I think the Stars are going to make some moves at the deadline as well. So Colorado's the easy answer. I think Winnipeg, Minnesota would be, not easy by any means, but, teams that I think Dallas could get by. And I think Edmonton's kind of in the same boat. As hard as it is to go up against, two of the best players in the world in McDavid and Draisaitl, I think, depending on what the Edmonton Oilers do for, the rest of the season as far as acquiring pieces for their roster, if you can find a way to slow down those two players, I think you have a good chance to win. So Colorado definitely goes at the top of my list there. But, the Western Conference is odd this season in that there's a lot of really good teams. The East has a lot of good teams too, but there seems to kind of be, a tier list or a class list of like your Bostons and Carolinas and then kind of everyone else, where it feels like the West is almost at a little bit more of a level playing field. And even teams like the LA Kings also have a little bit of, game planning that you have to prepare for. Their offense is unreal. And I think they're going to, be a very sneaky good team come playoff time too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the trade deadline definitely speaks a lot of volumes. And we know that with a lot of teams because, of course, during the first half of the season, I always say this is usually teams are searching for their identity. Like, what kind of team are they? And we know by January, February, March, you got to have your identity established, because by that point, if you're still searching it and you're right there in playoff mode, that now scares problems for your team because of the fact of there's not a whole lot of consistency and there's too many missed opportunities now. And then that kind of kills it to where you have a potentiality to beating the team, but yet missed it a few steps. And since you brought that up with the trade deadline, we know there's going to be some moves made, obviously, with Bo Horvat now a part of the New York Islanders. I think that's a great addition. They needed somebody to fill in, especially after losing Jordan Eberle to the expansion draft. What are you hearing out of Dallas media right now as far as the trade deadline goes? And is there a couple pieces they might search for during the deadline?
Yeah, the biggest piece I think coming out of Dallas right now that they're looking to add is some sort of top six winger, because the top line for the Stars is Jason Robertson, Rope Hintz, and Joe Pavelski, which I don't even feel biased saying this. It's the best line in the NHL. I mean, those guys are unreal with 66 points for Robertson, 48 Pavelski, and 46 for Rope Hintz this season. They've all been great, but the real hole on this team, if there is one, especially offensively, is finding someone to play alongside Tyler Seguin on that second line, because he's been fine this season, and there's been stretches where he's played alongside Robertson and Pavelski when Hintz has been injured. but there hasn't really been any sustained chemistry between him and anyone on that second line, whether it's been Mason Marchment or Dennis Gurianov or Radek Faksa. I mean, those are fine players, and they can be good in stretches, but they need to add that player that can play on the wing and have some good chemistry with Tyler Seguin, a guy that can score goals, but also set Tyler up as well and get him going. And there's not too much that I've seen in terms of specific names, but I mean, the Stars cap situation, like a lot of other teams, not super ideal. They're sitting at about $1.6 million right now. And so it might not be the flashiest move. I never really thought they were in the race for Bo Horvat. I know that there was some rumors here and there and that it maybe could have happened. But obviously, like you said, he's a member of the Islanders now. And I don't necessarily see them going for a big name, whether it be Timo Meier or even a guy like Dylan Larkin, who still hasn't re-signed with the Red Wings. Yeah. I think they'll settle for, a lesser known player on a smaller contract, a guy like Nick Ritchie out of Arizona, Nick Bukestad, also an Arizona Coyote, both those guys with cap hits, under $3 million that I think the Stars, if they send an NHL player and a prospect or a pick back to Arizona, they could get. So I would be on the lookout most for a top six winger. They could also look to add a depth defenseman as well and try to round out that decor under Miro Heiskanen.
I almost kind of feel like, because I know with a lot of these players, majority of them, they're going to be coming in as rentals. And I almost kind of feel like maybe a possibility I might point out, I can kind of see Brock Besser a little bit working on this line, because I kind of feel like, because number one, he hasn't gotten an extension yet with Vancouver, and I don't feel like he may get one soon. I know now Bo Horvat is shipped out, but I just think Vancouver, they're just having a ton of issues with as far as figuring that out. But I almost kind of feel like, Besser might work with this kind of line as long as the deal speaks for itself. And it's something that Dallas does not lose too much, to where they still are looking at the future and they can finagle a little bit of the financial cap line to where they can make it affordable for them to move forward, especially with the building of this offense. But it's going to be interesting all the way around. And I mean, the trade deadline's always the fun time of year where a lot of teams, they look for upgrades. But yeah, I just think it's going to be one of those, it's tightening up the pockets type thing, and there's not much to really finagle around. But I appreciate you coming on here, Dane. Where can everybody find you for everything Dallas Stars?
Yeah. They can find Locked On Stars on YouTube or wherever you get podcast at. Just search in Locked On Dallas Stars or Locked On Stars. And that's the same on social media as well, Instagram and Twitter. And then if anyone wants to find my personal Twitter account, it's just a nice, simple @Dane, 2 underscores, and then my last name, Lewis, and tweeting about the Dallas Stars and sometimes other Dallas sports as well. But it's mainly the Stars now that that football season has come to an end. So,
Yep. There you go, folks. Well, definitely catch Dane Lewis on Locked On Stars as well for everything you need to know about Dallas Stars. Appreciate you coming on by. Enjoy the All-Star weekend, and we'll definitely see how things shape up in the second half of the season, my friend.
Will do. Thanks, Jake. Have a good one.
You too. Yeah, it is really interesting about, just the NHL season as a whole, because, we had 2 great interviews from there, Chris Micieli and Dane Lewis. I mean, this is one of the things that the NHL, they really have to put on notice, because it's just a complete stretch of the pocket, and there's not much really to finagle with. A lot of these players now are going on as rentals. It's not giving it an opportunity where teams could literally add in pieces. I mean, listen, the NFL, because of the amount of money that they make, like they can afford to move pieces. They can afford to add in more, and they'll be just fine. They can figure out the cap situation. This is why that, because the 3 that we know that are all on cap salaries, which is NFL, NBA a little bit, and the NHL. All 3 of them are on caps, except for Major League Baseball, which is why I'm like, I feel like it would be that time to putting on, the cap situation for Major League Baseball, because a lot of these players are they're dumped on so much money just to play one position. It's insane. And I'm like, I don't understand it. But I feel like, with the NHL, and it's a fun All-Star weekend. I love these types of festivities, but Yeah, you're going to have a lot of teams that, second half teams, they're going to be coming in. They'll be ready to roll. They are going to want to compete, especially getting into the Stanley Cup playoffs, to the Stanley Cup final. But, I mean, this is kind of one of those financial situations that Gary Bettman and the rest of, the NHL body really has to talk about. I mean, it's one of those serious scenarios because there ain't going to be much. And we know that, here's the thing. Anybody that's ever done research on how expensive hockey equipment is, it's nuts. It's expensive, and not a lot of kids, especially with their parents, could even drop money to afford it. Now, if you got, the next big thing, that's the one thing. If you got the next big thing working up to his or her potential, then you may have that shot. You may have that chance, but it's tough. It's tough stretching out the bucks and all the rest of it. So I don't know. I think it'll be really, really interesting, but we'll see exactly how the rest of the season really pans out. But alrighty, folks, that's going to do it for me here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. I appreciate everybody who had came onto the show. Shout out to Chris Micieli of Locked On Avalanche and Dane Lewis of Locked On Dallas Stars. If you haven't done so already, because it's been a while now. We're on 152. We're 50 more from getting to the absolute milestone. That's 200 episodes of the show. Like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications on the show. And for all of you guys, SeatGeek is now the official partner with the Snake Sports Talk Show. SeatGeek is the place to go when you can't seem to find a seat at the affordable price, or capacity is just getting too much and you can't find the seat that you want. SeatGeek has you covered with lots of events, sporting events, live concerts, stand-up shows, and so much more. All that catch your interest. Use promo code SNAKESPORTS for $20 off of your first purchase of your first ticket. That is SeatGeek.com, promo code SNAKESPORTS. Jake the Snake Silva signing off here. Have a great rest of the weekend, and we will see you on the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show tomorrow. We've got Ryan Finkelstein from Locked On Mets that's going to be joining us, so you don't want to end up missing that. Take care of yourselves, guys. Have a great rest of your Saturday, and we will see you soon.